Welcome back to another video. My name's Jackson. Today we're going to be going through my top 40 wide receivers for this upcoming NFL fantasy season. Let's just hop right into it. We'll start with number 40. I have Quentin Johnston of the Los Angeles Chargers. He comes in at number 40, a lot to do with the fact that he's going to be on a good offense. With Justin Herbert attached to him, I think that, with Mike McDaniel coming over, this could be a pretty good offense. So I see him in the top 40. I also think he belongs in the top 40 just because he's going to be on the field a lot, running a lot of routes. That gives him opportunity. Justin Herbert's going to throw the ball a lot this season. Pretty much a whole offensive shift going from, Greg Roman offense to a Mike McDaniel offense. I think this is going to be one of the best offenses in the league. Granted, Quentin Johnston isn't a great talent, but I think that just because he's going to be on the field a lot with this offense, he's got a spot. Moving to wide receiver number 39 and 38, you really can kind of tier them both in this tier. Brian Thomas Jr., wide receiver 39, Jakobi Meyers, wide receiver 38. I think they're in very similar, aspects of their game for this upcoming season, both on good offenses, going to be a part of, a good passing attack with Liam Cohen. Last year, Jakobi Meyers found a lot of success with Trevor Lawrence when he got traded to the Jaguars. Brian Thomas Jr. kind of struggled last season, but he had a great rookie season, so we could see a bounce back from him there. I just think both of them being in this offense, you want to take a piece at least from someone in this offense. I like Parker Washington. I'm okay-ish on Brian Thomas Jr. and Jakobi Meyers, but being a part of this offense, it wouldn't hurt to take a piece of it, and I have Brian Thomas Jr., 39, Jakobi Meyers, wide receiver 38. Wide receiver 37 is Jayden Reed of the Green Bay Packers. At this point, it's kind of just sounds redundant, but Jayden Reed's going to be a part of a good offense with the Green Bay Packers. I think there's a lot of wide open in this wide receiver, and we don't know if Christian Watson's going to step up. We don't know if Jayden Reed's going to step up. They still have Tucker Kraft, who I think is going to be more of the focal point of this offense, passing attack. But Jayden Reed just got an extension. When he gets his targets and he gets, Jordan Love is getting them the ball, I think that Jayden Reed could be a valuable player on this offense. And right now he is going at wide receiver 40, so I'm a little bit ahead of ADP on him, versus underdog. So I just think that, with Jayden Reed being attached to Jordan Love, and Jordan Love is if he's going to throw more, they got to go somewhere. I think Jayden Reed could be a benefactor of that. Wide receiver 36, I have DK Metcalf of the Pittsburgh Steelers going into year 2 with Aaron Rodgers. Now they have a whole new system with Mike McCarthy and, a new offensive coordinator. A stat I did see, Mike McCarthy, is really top 10 pretty much every year in pass attempts. So expect, there to be a lot more pass attempts with this offense. I do think they do take a step up, with this passing game and just the offense in general. DK is going to be a field stretcher while Michael Pittman's going to be, the more receptions and, the underneath guy. But I do like DK Metcalf in this role with the Steelers. And I think that, he could be in for a big season if Aaron Rodgers is on point like he was last year. Moving into DJ Moore of the Buffalo Bills. He now is on the Buffalo Bills with Josh Allen as his quarterback. I think this is, potential. He's got some potential. He wasn't really liked in Chicago. I think him and Ben Johnson kind of butt heads last season. But now he gets a new start with the Bills and Josh Allen. Coach Joe Brady is now the head coach there as well. I really just have him ranked right here just because he's probably going to be the number 1 in this offense. I really don't believe in DJ Moore a whole lot as a player, but attached to Josh Allen and, probably still a pretty high-powered offense just because of Josh Allen, you got to rank him inside your top 40. But this is where he falls for me just because I think he's lost a lot of talent, driving his game from season to season. And at this point in his career, I think, Josh Allen could revive it, but I don't really see, maybe he gets 800, 900 yards and, 6-7 touchdowns around there, but I don't see him exceeding expectations. Number 34, I have Courtland Sutton with the Denver Broncos. I think Bo Nix will be healthy this season, so that gives Courtland Sutton a plus. He is getting older. He's just been okay, last season. And now they have Jalen Waddle in that wide receiver room, so that makes it a little more crowded. Less targets for Courtland Sutton, which I think that hurts him a little bit. Yeah, he may be solid as your wide receiver 3 or like a flex play this season, but I wouldn't expect, a whole lot out of him. production wise. Maybe he goes for, 800 and, 5 touchdowns or something like that. But I am not too thrilled if I had Courtland Sutton on my team. But I do have him ranked ahead of DJ Moore just because I think, he's shown a little bit more over, the past 2 seasons rather than DJ Moore, who really hasn't been a benefactor. But, Courtland Sutton, he could prove us wrong, but I have him ranked here at this point. Number 33, I have wide receiver Josh Downs of the Indianapolis Colts. Yes, Daniel Jones is coming off of that injury, but I think Josh Downs has a real chance to take a step up in this offense. There's no more Michael Pittman Jr. He's going to be the number 2 on this team. And Alec Pierce is also dealing with, some foot injury, and he had a surgery and everything. So you never know what could happen with Alec Pierce as well. I think Josh Downs really could take a step up this season. He's been explosive. His yards per out run is always great. And if Daniel Jones can really just be, somewhat good this season, I think Josh Downs can be a huge benefactor of that. And he's an explosive young player that has caught my eye year in and out. So I like Josh Downs a little bit this season, as like a solid flex play to start, and maybe he takes a jump, middle of the season, ends up being like wide receiver 2. I could see that happening for sure. Next, we have Parker Washington. I think he's just built the most trust with Trevor Lawrence over, the course of last season. And I think, that trust goes a long way in this offense. Like I said, kind of about Brian Thomas Jr. and Jakobi Meyers, they're going to be in a great offense. So I think there's going to be a lot of targets to go around. I just think Parker Washington has, the most built up trust with Trevor Lawrence. And we saw last season, he was running across the middle, taking hits, catching passes, kind of came out of nowhere, honestly. And I like him as a shifty little player that can get the job done. And Trevor trusts him, and that's something that you need on this high-powered offense, who scored a lot last season. But I do have him ahead of, Jakobi Meyers and Brian Thomas Jr., really just because of that trust that he has with Trevor Lawrence. And to round out this tier of players, I have at wide receiver number 31, Carnell Tate of the Tennessee Titans. From everything we've heard so far, he is supposed to be the one. Brian Daboll is down there in Tennessee now with Robert Saleh. I think that, they need a number 1 offensive weapon. He could be the answer. It's just a little bit risky just because he's a rookie and we're, still figuring out Cam Ward and everything. But if Cam Ward takes a step and, I think Carnell Tate is going to be, the huge benefactor of that because he's going to be the number 1. He's going to be running all the routes. I think he could be a nice wide receiver 3 or a great flex play in your leagues this year. At wide receiver 30, I have Jordan Tyson of the New Orleans Saints. I think this passing offense is going to take a step in the right direction. Kellen Moore, I think, is a great offensive mind. Tyler Shuck looked good last season. I think he's going to take another step forward. And yes, Chris Olave is still there. I just think... Excuse me. Yes, Chris Olave is still there. I just think that this offense is definitely going to take a step in the right direction with the passing game. Jordan Tyson, he was great in college, probably dealt with some injuries, but if he stays healthy this season, I think he's going to get a lot of targets and a lot of catches and build that trust with Tyler Shuck. Kellen Moore likes to run a lot of offensive plays. He's high tempo. And I think Jordan Tyson, is going to complement that very well. There's just going to be a lot of targets to go around in this room, and Chris Olave and Jordan Tyson, I think, are going to benefit from that. Wide receiver 29, I have Christian Watson of the Green Bay Packers. Yeah, I think he's probably considered like the alpha of the wide receiver room. I don't think he's going to be, the top focal point of this offense. I think that's going to be Tucker Kraft. But really, after Tucker Kraft, I think it's pretty wide open. Christian Watson's been great when he's been on the field, but he hasn't, played a whole season yet. He's been in the league, 2, 3, 4 years now. He gets hurt very often. He did get a pretty incentivized new contract extension where all his money is going to be coming from if he plays and if he gets receptions and yards and all that. So, he's going to be incentivized to play more, probably play through some injuries now, but I think, he just is a little bit ahead of Jayden Reed just because of what we've seen in that small sample size, but I can't put him much higher than this just because of that small sample size. It really is scary to move him any higher. Wide receiver 28, I have Rome Odunze of the Chicago Bears. I think last season, he was great before he got hurt, and then he kind of got banged up with the foot injury. It was never really the same. And I know there have been some quotes of kind of like, hey, he may not ever be the same player again, which may be true. But I just want to take some shots on this Bears offense and, this Ben Johnson offense in general. Colson Loveland, Rome Odunze, Luther Burden. I think they're all going to be, great players and great offenses. I would say Rome's probably at the bottom of that offense for me, but I think he's just ahead of these guys just because of this offense in general. Ben Johnson, he's great at scheming up plays. And, Rome is a high talent pick. He has that draft capital. So if he can, be what he was before he got injured last season, I think that's going to smash his ADP. But that's really why I have him ranked at this area. I just think he's going to be a good player on a good offense. And you can't pass up on those. The next wide receiver I have is Marvin Harrison Jr. with the Arizona Cardinals. Last season, he didn't play a full season. He got a little bit hurt, banged up. Michael Wilson kind of emerged. I would really say Michael Wilson emerged just because Marvin Harrison Jr. was really gone. They were throwing the ball so much just because they had really nothing to lose. But this season, I think, there really isn't going to be a world where they're throwing the ball that much as they were last season. Yeah, they're still going to be pretty bad throwing the ball a lot. I just don't think they're going to be throwing it on the level that they were last season, because last season was really just an insane outlier, in my opinion. It was really nothing like we've ever seen. But I think Marvin Harrison Jr., if this new offense and this new offensive coordinator and LaFleur kind of really use him the way he should be used, I think he could be great for this team and smash his ADP. But from what we've seen so far, that's why I have to rank him at this point. But for potential-wise, I think LaFleur could change his career trajectory, honestly. And if, this year Jacoby Brissett is throwing the ball a lot, I think, a lot of them could go to Marvin Harrison Jr. They just got to get him moving around in the offense. Last year, he's pretty stagnant, didn't move a lot. And the same thing before that. But now they have a new offense with LaFleur. So I think, good things could come out of it. The next wide receiver I have is Jameson Williams with the Detroit Lions. Very explosive player, going to be on a great offense again with Jared Goff, attached to a pretty solid quarterback. He is the number 2 of that Lions offense. Really, I have him ranked at this point because he really only explodes when Sam Laporta is out. And now Sam Laporta is probably going to be healthy again this season. We can't really predict injury. And Jameson Williams was a huge factor when he was missing last season. But I think he's still an explosive player on a great offense, still going to have plenty of targets to go around, still behind Amon-Ra. It's just what it is at this point. But nothing really much else to say about Jameson Williams. I just have him at this point. Wide receiver 25, I have Jalen Waddle. I have been seeing a lot of people, kind of rank him, higher and higher and higher just because he's now the alpha of this new Broncos offense. But I really don't see it that way. I still think Courtland Sutton's going to be a factor of this offense. Sean Payton loves to spread the targets around. Jalen Waddle, yeah, he's still a solid player. I just don't see him much of an alpha wide receiver that everyone may think he is. Yeah, he's still going to be probably the one in this offense. I just don't think he's like the alpha that everyone is saying that he is. But, attached to Sean Payton, attached to Bo Nix, I think he's still going to be, a pretty competent wide receiver 2 of this range. But for me, I'm not in love with him this season. Moving over to wide receiver 24, we have Malik Nabers. Now, this is a tough one. We've all seen the news. It's not looking good. His knee, the video of him limping and stuff at the charity softball game or whatever that was. I don't think he's going to be on, he's not going to be on the team the first 4 games. He's going to start on the PUP list this season, I think. Really, I should have him lower. But for right now, I probably will move him lower after this. But for right now, I have him here at wide receiver 24, just because we haven't heard, definitive news, but it's looking more and more worse every single day. And I don't think he's going to be, on the team to start the season. I think he'll be on the PUP list. But right now, I have him here, but I'll probably be moving him down here pretty soon. Next player up, we have Luther Burden. I have him ranked at this section just because he's a little more of a volatile player. I could see him, being the alpha in this, receiver room. Ben Johnson saying buy stock in Luther Burden. But I also could see, Caleb just kind of being inconsistent with throwing to him. Maybe he doesn't take the step up that we all think. But he could just take 100 screens to the house. Not actually, but he could just get a lot of screen work. And DJ Moore is gone. I think him and Colson Loveland and Rome, I just want to be attached to this offense. with Ben Johnson. And if Caleb Williams is consistent with throwing the ball to Luther Burden, I think that could, really elevate his ceiling. There's just a lot of upside with him, going into this season. Next, we have Mike Evans of the San Francisco 49ers. He makes the transition to them this offseason. He's Kyle Shanahan's number one weapon. This offense is going to score points. They still have Christian McCaffrey. George Kittle still iffy about coming back, but I think Mike Evans is definitely going to be the alpha of this receiving room. He might be a little older and, a little more volatile as a player, but I think that Mike Evans can really, show out this season. Still got some stuff left in the tank. Brock Purdy's going to get him the ball. This Kyle Shanahan offense is going to put up points. There's not really much else to say just besides the fact that he's going to be the number one target on this offense. Next player we have is Terry McLaurin. I expect kind of him and Jaden Daniels to get back on track this season. I have him ranked here just because of the fact that it's going to be, a good offense where I think they could take a step up definitely from last season just because of all the injuries and, the play calling and everything. But now Cliff Kingsbury is gone. They do have David Blau now, which I think that's, going to be a plus for them. Open up the playbook a little bit, get Jaden Daniels, back into his comfort zone. Hopefully they both can stay healthy this season. And I think, he's got a pretty high ceiling just being attached to Jaden Daniels alone. And I do expect him and Jaden Daniels for a bounce back this season. Next player I have is Zay Flowers with the Baltimore Ravens. As we all know, he's attached to Lamar Jackson. That's a good quarterback to be attached to. He hasn't really hit the floor or really the ceiling that we've all kind of been hoping for over these years. But he has the chance to, pop off for 10 touchdowns, at 1,100 yards at any point this season just because he's attached to Lamar Jackson. And that's, probably somebody that you want to be attached to. I don't mind Zay at this position in this point of the draft, but he is just, kind of unpredictable. He hasn't really, shown that he can be the alpha for your fantasy team. But he will be the number one target on this Ravens offense. Getting a new offensive system in there could be a little bit scary, but just being attached to Lamar Jackson will do enough for your team. Next player I have here is Ted McMillan. He's going to be the number one offense on the Carolina Panthers this season, just like last year. I think it's going to be pretty similar. Dave Canales is going to have Bryce Young throwing the ball pretty much just a Tet, but there's not a lot of pass attempts in this offense, not a lot of yards. Bryce Young really only hit like 200 yards a few times last season, which is, abysmal. Really, he averaged like 190 passing yards a game last year, which is pretty bad. So not a huge ceiling for Ted McMillan, but he's got a pretty solid floor, I would say. Probably going to get close to, 8 targets a game, probably bringing down 6 to 7 of them with probably, 60, 70, 80 yards a game, probably a touchdown here and there. But the ceiling's just not really for me. And if you're going to try and win a league, I don't think, he's someone that I would want on my team with a pretty low ceiling that is not going to do the job. Next player we have is Emeka Egbuka at wide receiver 18. He started off great last season, kind of the same thing with Rome Odunze. First 5-6 weeks of the season, he was great, and then he got hurt. But the thing with Emeka Egbuka is he never really missed a game per se. With the early stretch with the hamstring, he played through. And I think that, kind of derailed his season. It just kept getting worse and worse and it's just affecting his play. Not only that, Baker Mayfield got hurt. Everyone pretty much on the whole entire offense was hurt last season. But I do expect a bounce back from the Bucs this year and Baker Mayfield and Egbuka as a whole. He's going to be a great talent. I think he could really break out this season. And he's got the wide receiver one outlook in my eyes for him. But I do really like him. I am just basing him off of what he did last season. And he does have a really good high ceiling. So be on the lookout for Emeka Egbuka in your drafts. Next wide receiver I have is Garrett Wilson of the New York Jets. Really, I have him in this tier just because it's going to be probably a pretty bad offense. But he's going to see, a lot of targets. He's the alpha of the offense. He's a great talent to have on your team. As in the real world with the NFL, but on your fantasy team, I wouldn't say he's very high ceiling. I could really see him going for probably, maybe 1,000, 1,100 yards, 8 touchdowns, something like that. Probably around, 80 to 90 catches, maybe 100 if he gets lucky. But they are going to probably throw the ball a lot just because they're going to be pretty bad. And Geno can't be worse than the quarterbacks he's had in previous years. I think Geno will probably be, average at best, maybe a little bit below average at worst. But there's really just not a huge ceiling for Garrett Wilson. I am just ranking him here because he's a great talent. He's kind of almost like a shoe-in for 1,000, 1,100 yards if he plays a full season. So I like him at this spot. Next up, we have Davante Adams of the Los Angeles Rams. Last season, I'm pretty sure he led the league in touchdown receptions, and he only played like 15 games with the injury at the end of the year. I think he runs it back. He's going to be with this, Rams offense, same system, Sean McVay, Matt Stafford, Puka Nacua. I don't think it's going to matter. They're just going to run it back this season. They're going to be a great team, throwing the ball. Davante Adams is a huge red zone target for Matt Stafford, which we saw last season. And I think they run it back. He's a little bit older in age, but he's just got a super high floor with this offense. And, he's got the touchdown upside as well. So can't go wrong with Davante. The next wide receiver I have is Chris Olave of the New Orleans Saints. I really like him this season. Last year, he really popped off with Tyler Shuck and, this Kellen Moore offense. Like I said, kind of for Jordan Tyson. They're going to run a lot of plays. They're going to be, taking a step in the right direction for the passing game. I just think Chris Olave is going to be a benefactor of that. Being a part of a really good passing game is always nice. They have a really easy schedule this season, playing in the NFC South and just, getting that fourth place schedule as well. They're in a dome. Chris Olave is the alpha of the room. I just think, he's got really, really great upside, running a lot of plays, a lot of pass attempts. So look out for Chris Olave for sure. Wide receiver 14, I have Ladd McConkey with the Los Angeles Chargers. This is a guy that I'm really starting to grow more and more fond to as, each day goes on. I really am in love with this Chargers offense. Being attached to Justin Herbert is amazing. Getting Mike McDaniel in this offensive system, he's a genius. So I think they're going to put up a lot of points. There's going to be a lot of pass attempts going around this offense. Ladd McConkey is going to, break out this season. He had a great rookie year, a little bit of a down year last year, but I think he's due for a huge bounce back. And I'm really just in love with, this Chargers offense as a whole, and I want to be attached to that. So I'm definitely targeting Ladd in drafts this season. Next up, we have Devonta Smith with the Philadelphia Eagles. I think he's really going to take a step forward this year, just being the wide receiver one on the Eagles now. I think the whole problem last year was the play calling with Kevin Patullo and that offense. Now they lose A.J. Brown as well. Targets are going to be going around. They're going to be going to Devonta Smith. I think, he's a great wide receiver. He's just been kind of in the shadow of A.J. Brown for this long time. It's not going to be a super high passing offense. So that's why I have him ranked at this range. But I do think he's going to get enough targets, enough receptions, enough touchdowns to where he's going to, be right at this ADP. And I'm not, super in love with him, but I'm definitely not fading him either. I just have to rank him in this spot just the way I see it. Next up, I have T. Higgins. Going to be the wide receiver 2 for the Cincinnati Bengals. Bengals, maybe their defense takes a step up this season. I am, not super in love with their defense, so I really think it's going to be pretty similar to previous years where they're going to have to throw a lot. They're going to be a super high-powered offense. This team's going to be clicking on all cylinders. It's going to be really hard for other defenses to stop this offense. T. Higgins, he is the number 2 behind Jamar Chase, but he's the touchdown guy. He's the guy that can go up and get it in the red zone. Joe Burrow likes throwing to, both of these guys. So T. Higgins is really kind of just like George Pickens to me, just, like a round and a half later. I find them very similar, even when they're with their counterpart, CeeDee Lamb and, Jamar Chase. They're both very similar players. It's just you can get T a little bit later, which I do like T this year a lot. Going to be on a super high-powered offense attached to Joe Burrow. So nothing really wrong with T. Higgins. He's just in this spot for me. Next up, we have Nico Collins. To be frank with you, I'm not really super in love with Nico Collins. I really just ranked him at this range just because he's such a great talent. And we have seen, his big years before. But this season, I really don't expect CJ Stroud to take a step up. I think the system is a little botched. Their offensive line is terrible. Going to be ranked one of the last in the league, probably. But, I have to rank him just here at this talent level is just too much. He could, have some spike weeks here and there. I just don't see it playing out for a full season, but his talent just lands him at this spot for now. Wide receiver 10 and the final player of this B tier, I have George Pickens. Kind of like what I was saying with T. Higgins, very similar. George Pickens, last year, breakout year, 1,400 yards, a bunch of touchdowns. A lot of them did come with CD being out, but even when CD did play, he was still a pretty solid player. And you can't deny that he did not do enough to earn what he's going to be this season. I think him and CD pair very well together. This offense in Dallas is going to be very similar to the one in Cincinnati. Very high powered. They're going to be able to move a lot. A lot of defense is going to have trouble, stopping this offense. So I really do like George Pickens. He's, a guy that can go up and get it, red zone threat, kind of like T. Higgins. Pretty much similar, very similar players, just George Pickens' price is a little bit higher. But I really like George Pickens along with, T. Higgins this season. Next up, I have Rashee Rice of the Kansas City Chiefs. I have him in this A tier because, if Patrick Mahomes is going to be back this season, the offense is getting kind of a new system. Matt Nagy is gone. I think, maybe they could go back to the way they were, a few years ago in like 2022 and before. They really haven't been the same since like 2023, 2024. But this team is bound to take a step up attached to Patrick Mahomes. Huge boost for Rashee Rice. And he's a good shifty player. If he's, 100% healthy this year, he's definitely going to be the alpha in this receiver room, getting a ton of the targets. I really don't like Xavier Worthy. Travis Kelce's kind of, old and washed a little bit. So that really just leaves Rashee Rice to be, the main guy in this room. I'm pretty, set on him, getting probably 100 catches this year, 1,300 yards, probably 10 touchdowns. So just, a good solid wide receiver. The off the field stuff may be a little iffy, but if he's fully healthy this year, I expect him to have a pretty solid season. Next player I have up is Drake London, another guy kind of just a super great talent, maybe probably in a bottom half offense this season, where I think Drake London really came on the scene last year before getting hurt. He was like the wide receiver 5, before he got hurt, but you can't deny he's just a great talent, great player. And if Tua can kind of get him the ball this season, get him 100 plus targets, get him 100 plus catches, I think that this spot for Drake London is really like where he should fall. If the offense can be somewhat competent and Bijan and Drake London can sustain drives, I think Drake London could really pay off at this spot. And then, if Tua can be old Tua, then we might be in business. But I'm not super in love with him. I'm not fading him either. I just kind of rank him in this spot just because he showed a lot last season before he got hurt. And if he's what he was last season before he got hurt, then I think he's going to crush his ADP. Next player I have is A.J. Brown, making the move this offseason to the New England Patriots. I think this is huge for him, getting, into a more pass-friendly offense. I think this is the year that he really, hits his ceiling, kind of like a honeymoon phase as what I've been hearing from other people in the community. But I really am in love with A.J. Brown this season. He's got all the talent in the world. I think that Drake May is great at throwing the long ball, over the middle, the medium to short routes as well. But A.J. Brown is, the guy who can go up and get at any point. Great talent, going to be in a great offense this season. Reuniting with Mike Vrabel. They love each other. They got great chemistry. A.J. Brown, smash for me. I'm so in love with him this season. I think he's got all the talent in the world. He's got the ceiling this year. With the Eagles, he was so touchdown capped. He never really had or could reach his full potential, but I think now we can finally see that this season. Next up, I have Justin Jefferson with the Minnesota Vikings. I'm not really super in love with Justin Jefferson this season. It's really just the talent and the system that he's in that I do like a lot. That's why I have him ranked at this spot at number 6. Not a whole lot to say about him, just mainly I'm a little scared off just with the QB situation. We don't know if it's going to be Kyler, it's going to be J.J. McCarthy, but if I had to guess, it's probably going to be Kyler Murray. He's had some struggles, throwing over the middle, kind of finding his wide receivers. He's more on the shorter side, so that's tough for him. And he's a scrambling-ish quarterback, but if Kyler's on this season, then Kyler will be on in this system. And, I don't have any doubts that KOC can get this right. And I think Justin Jefferson, if Kyler's on, Justin Jefferson's going to be, a smash. But it's just a little tough for me to decipher, is Kyler going to be, what he was, a good quarterback again, and KOC is going to get him right, or is it going to be kind of a dumpster fire that we've been seeing with, J.J. McCarthy and past quarterbacks. But, I'm excited to see kind of how it plays out, but I'm really in love with Justin Jefferson just as a player and talent alone, and being in the KOC system is great, but Kyler Murray is a little bit scary for me. Next up, we have CeeDee Lamb of the Dallas Cowboys. Great receiver, great system. He's going to be great this season. It's just really the emergence of George Pickens that, I think caps his ceiling a little bit. I am not sure, with the emergence of George Pickens, I'm not sure how it's going to play out this year, more as like who is going to be dominating versus who is going to be, the number two. I think it's kind of like a 1A, 1B scenario where I think they both kind of are 1,300 yard receivers this year and kind of splitting touchdowns. But George Pickens is going to have his games. CeeDee Lamb's going to have his games. But if I had to pick one over the other, it's probably CeeDee Lamb just because of the history with Dak, the chemistry and everything. But you can't deny the emergence of George Pickens. That's why I have him at 5 here. If George Pickens wasn't there, I'd probably have CeeDee probably 2 or 3, honestly. But George Pickens is there, so I have to move him down a little bit. But he's definitely, in my eyes, still the alpha of this room. I think he's better than George Pickens, but the way that things shake out, George Pickens emerged last year, so he's going to have his games. Like I said, CeeDee will have his, but it'll be interesting to see. I'm not fully fading CeeDee by any means. I'm not, super in love with him either, but just the talent in the system, you have to rank him this high. Next up, we have Amon-Ra St. Brown of the Detroit Lions. He's Mr. Consistent. He always, finishes like top 3, top 4 in the NFL wide receiver ranks at the end of the season. So I have him here. He's a great talent on a great offense. He's the alpha. Not really too much to say about him. He's just pretty much probably the safest pick of the draft. And I really like him a lot. You can't really go wrong with him, so that's why I have him here at this spot. Next up, we have Jackson Smith-Njigba as my wide receiver 3 this season. With Clint Kubiak leaving, maybe some question marks on the offense. Maybe he, really can't reach that level he did last season. It's so hard to do. That's why I have him ranked at number 3. But he's still a great talent. He's still got chemistry with, Sam Darnold, this offense in general. But I think, with Clint Kubiak leaving, it could hurt him a little bit. We may see a little bit of regression just because his last season was so good and, the craziest thing ever. But still going to be, really big factor for the Seahawks, and teams and defenses got to look out for him a ton all over the field. Fantasy football is, that's a whole different world, but I think he's still going to be great this season in fantasy football. He's just a PPR machine. He's going to get the yards, the touchdowns. He's the alpha of that wide receivers room. It's just a little scary right now with Clint Kubiak leaving. We aren't really too sure of what this offense could look like coming up. My wide receiver number 2 this year is Ja'Marr Chase. He's got all the ceiling in the world. The Bengals are going to be rolling this season. Even though T. Higgins is there, I really don't see it as like a cap or anything for Ja'Marr Chase. Maybe the touchdowns really, but the yards and the catches, that's Ja'Marr. That's what he, thrives off of. But even if, this offense is, T. Higgins scores like 10 touchdowns, I also could see Ja'Marr Chase scoring, 10 to 12 touchdowns too. This offense is just going to be so good. There's going to be so many, pass attempts to go around because defense is probably not going to be amazing. But I do see him behind one guy who we have left, and I'll show you guys here right now. My last and final player in my wide receiver 1 going into the season is Puka Nacua of the Los Angeles Rams. There's not really a whole lot to say. Great offense with Sean McVay, attached to the former MVP of Matt Stafford. They're going to be rolling this season. He's the alpha of this room. He's the alpha, I think, of the entire NFL. Puka Nacua, great route runner, solid, hands, reliable. He's just, I think, the most complete wide receiver that we have going into the season. System is great. It's not going to get much better than that, but that's pretty much going to wrap it up for this video. I appreciate all you guys watching, and this is my top 40 wide receivers. If you guys enjoyed, just hit the thumbs up and subscribe. We starting to get rolling here with fantasy football, and I really love fantasy football, so this is what we thrive on around here. But like I said, if you guys enjoyed, don't forget to hit the thumbs up and subscribe. Thanks for watching.